Banbury. It's a lovely place. Not famous for too many things, but synonymous with one. And this is where the Prodrive story started. Before the M40 was finished, before Marks and Spencer's. This car park was very different back then. But now we're here, Prodrive 2.0. It's bigger, it's better, and this year it's celebrating 40 years in the industry. We're here today to meet the two men who've been behind this company from day one. David, we really should start this story with you. Tell us, where did this begin? Where did the passion for motorsport for you come from?
Well, I guess if I've lived next to a racetrack, I've lived next to sort of Brands Hatch or Silverstone, I would have sort of followed motor racing from an early stage. But I was brought up on a little farm in North Wales where all around us were rallies and night rallies mostly, navigation events. But then the RAC rally used to come past, near enough past our front door in Clochainog Forest. So my brothers and I, I've got three younger brothers, we all went with my father. And I was probably 12 years old, I guess, and we sat on the corner watching the cars come through Clochainog Forest, right to the very last car. In those days, the Army Land Rovers and Minis, and I suppose from that moment on, I was hooked on rallying.
I'm not remembering the RAC going through Coventry, I'm sure it did, but
no,
what about for you?
It did used to go down the M6, so I've stood on the M6 motorway bridge.
It's not
Really?
the same.
Yeah.
It's not the same.
Not the same.
No, it's not the same. Yeah, but for me, I suppose the only motorsport that I had any contact with was motocross. You know, I was in Coventry. There was no rallies, no racing, but there was a motocross track just down the road. It could easily have been motorbikes, and the only thing I can think of that probably changed course a little bit was my sister's boyfriend was into cross-country rallying.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and that's how I first got into sort of competing.
Yeah, that's
Full circle now.
Well, I was
Yeah,
going to
so full
say, yeah.
circle, yeah.
So
The first things I ever competed in were in Land Rovers. Yeah.
Wow. For you, David, it was more the business side. Of course, you won a world championship in 81, but already in the back of your mind with Ian Parry, things have begun to progress a little bit.
Not really. It's, you like to think back now, and I'm sure we'll sort of try and rewrite history and say it was all very strategic and we thought about it very carefully, but that was far from the truth, wouldn't you say so, David?
Yeah. Survival.
It was mostly survival in those days, that's right. I remember when we got to a stage, there were only 14 of us in the beginning at Silverstone, a little lock-up at Silverstone. And I remember it was so chaotic. Somebody once said to me, David, if you carry on like this, there'll be no more couriers in Oxfordshire to keep delivering the parts. And it was it really was hand-to-mouth.
It was mad, yeah.
It was a big deal, though, when you moved to that premises. Was it 86?
Yeah, just down the road here.
Down the road?
Yeah, it was probably, we were in Silverstone a year or so. And maybe 2 years.
Oh, it was over Christmas of 86, 87, wasn't it?
I can't
yeah,
remember.
86, 87, I think we
Before the
moved to
motorway was here.
Yeah.
It was literally before the motorway.
There was no motorway.
Was it?
Yeah. We bought the land all the way up to the motorway, or what was going to be the motorway, and we thought it would be quite a good location, and it turned out to be quite a dominant one.
It was, wasn't it? I mean, we'll skip ahead a little bit here. Was there any, for me, there's always enormous sadness that you're not where you were, because as a child I grew up almost with my father going up the motorway, almost having an accident as we were staring in just to try and see what was there. Was there any emotion when you left that building?
Well, we've only come a mile down the road.
But it was
it's not like we moved country.
But it was kind of symbolic, wasn't it? It was, you were there and I guess you still are here. But
we're still here. We're still in Banbury, and we still feel very much part of the community here in Banbury. Our roots are here, and I dare say always will be.
Yeah, but for you, Lappy, it was always more the engineering side of the business that got you involved.
Absolutely, yeah. But I was just thinking about the move. I think you have to put everything in the context of, you need to understand how mad every day, every week, every month of the year is. And the process of moving here was done, in double quick time, under massive pressure and so on. There's no time to think about being sentimental about the old days or whatever. We're suddenly faced with, what do we have, 6 months to get out of the old place and into here.
Really?
Yep. And I think that's how the last 40 years has been. We're always so wrapped up in the moment.
We're trying to change that now. We're trying to be a bit more organised.
Yeah.
I think we are, aren't we?
Yeah, we are more organised, but the pressure's no less.
No.
Yeah.
There's always a car to be built, isn't there?
I think you asked me a question a little while ago. Where's the stuff on its way to Dakar? Well, it's somewhere in the middle of the Mediterranean. It's on its way.
It went about 3 weeks
just over
ago.
a week's time. I'm on an aeroplane to go to Saudi Arabia.
Yeah.
There's not much time for sitting around thinking backwards,
But that's neither of you are like that in any way, are you? Very forward-looking. There's always the next project.
I'd get bored if it was anything different from that. I'm sort of, I started off life training as a chartered accountant. God forbid what would happen if I carried on that. But no, it's there's never 2 days the same here, and it's all sort of quite frenetic. And even today, when we're far more organised, and we've got sort of best part of 700 staff in the business now.
Yeah, incredible. And we see that the Porsche behind you. That's essentially where the story started. Tell us a little bit about the Rothmans link and the Porsche link in the early days.
Well, Rothmans have been Rothmans has been involved with me for many years prior to that. 76, I ended up organising a car rally for them in Kuwait, and that's where it all began. And built a relationship with them, organised events out in the Middle East. Eventually, they ended up sponsoring Ari and myself for the World Championship. And then when we set up the team, it was natural that they would be our partners, and so they funded the first Porsches. And of course, we thought these things were sort of Porsche. Well, they knew what they were doing. They deliver us a rally car. Didn't live up to sort of Middle East rallying, and that's when David came on the scene, trying to sort it all out.
But it was a great place and a great way to start, wasn't it?
It was the same sort of frenetic madness, but it was a perfect project for a new team. Yeah. We didn't have to start from zero, but we had lots of challenges to sort of throw ourselves at, and we just I think Nigel Riddle might still have 2 or 3 pages of A4 with all the problems that had been identified on the car that we had to work our way down in that first year.
Yeah, it was probably in at the deep end.
Yeah, it was in the deep end, but it was within our capability. Yeah. But we learnt massively, and it just went on and on. Every year was another step up and another step up. Within 2 years later, we were doing the M3.
Yeah.
And then we were doing, 3 years after that, we were doing a Subaru.
Yeah.
And then, it just went on and on.
I've always felt that, if you sat somebody down as an individual and say, this is what the challenge is going to be, this is what you're going to do, you'd just give up. You wouldn't even start, you wouldn't even attempt it. But when you get a body of people who are just, they don't know what their limitations are, and just collectively you think, of course we can do that. There was never any doubt in our mind that we could just take these things on. It's the, I suppose, the naivety and innocence of youth in those days. Was
it a wrench for you to get out of the co-driving seat, or were you done?
No. I'd done that stint, and I couldn't really see the purpose in going around the houses yet again to sort of try and win a championship you've done already. And I wanted to move on. And to be honest, I was getting a bit frightened in that last year with Harry.
I was going to say, have you ever sat next to Harry?
No, that's a very good point. I guess now it's a good time to move on. You mentioned Subaru there. Was that a turning point for the company when?
Absolutely. That was it was at a critical point. The world of rallying was moving into four-wheel drive, and we were there with a very competitive two-wheel drive car, the BMW M3, and great on asphalt. But we were left for dead on the gravel events, and the majority of World Championship was gravel. So when Mr. Kuze came along, and no one gives him enough credit for being the real father of this whole project, and the Subaru. It had all the potential right from the beginning, and it just took David and his engineering team to sort of get the best out of it.
But you must take great credit from the fact that apparently Kuze-san came to Thousand Lakes in I think '88 when you had Ari in the M3. Yeah. He looked at all of the operations and chose yours.
Yeah, you're right. He did. He spotted that. And you know what? Sometimes in life you meet people from a totally different culture, from a different way of life, from poles apart, but you find an extraordinary empathy and someone you can really get on with, and there was a trust between him and us. He believed in us. He just said he didn't interfere with anything we did. He just gave us the mandate. He said, I'll sort out all the Japanese side of it, and he did. And it was a wonderful combination.
When I look back now, his trust and support is unbelievable. It's difficult to imagine any manufacturer given us the blank sheet, and
how
the support.
young and inexperienced we were at the time.
Yeah.
But we didn't let him down.
No, I think that's the point, isn't it? Very early on, you demonstrated the success the car could have, and one of the interesting aspects for me is that they retained the engine development, but it was, I think, was it Thousand Lakes in 90?
Quite early on, moved to us.
Yeah, that was quite pivotal, wasn't it? You needed to take everything on board.
Yeah, the Japanese, the one, not failing, but one of they came from a very industrial, very automotive background, so they were quite conservative in their approach, and you're not going to win anything if you're going to be that cautious especially with engine development. So what we thought were sort of normal processes to go through, they thought would be extraordinary risks.
Yes. Yeah. What about that car, that essentially the production legacy? Was it a dream to work with? There were limitations engineering wise?
What can I say? We already kind of knew the answer we were going to get. They sent us a car to have a look at when we first started to discuss the project. It started off by them sending a legacy for us to look at and report back what we thought. And obviously it was one of those situations where it was such a great opportunity for us. We knew the answer had to be, yes, this can be a winning car.
Yeah.
But I think of the time, it absolutely was. Yeah, it had all the right things. It had, turbocharged, 2-litre engine. It had 4-wheel drive already. There was enough in the regulations that we were confident from the start. 20 years later, it's a different story with World Rally Car regulations and so on. It becomes not necessarily the place you would start that journey from, but for the time,
it was perfect for Group A.
It was a very good car to start with.
And you started well with a couple of Finns, with Ari and with Marku, but there was a driver coming in that was really the final piece of the jigsaw. What was it that you saw with Colin on, I think it was the 1990 RAC in that RED Sierra?
You'd like to sit down now and say this was a very clearly thought out plan, that we spotted him and we identified and really said, the truth of the matter is, Jimmy came to me in the Autosport show of that year and said, you know what, and I'd followed Colin since he was a youngster. He'd been, as a teenager, he'd come on events with us as well, because Jimmy was driving the team. And Jimmy said he was hoping to do the British Championship, but he's been let down by Ford, and Ford aren't going to fund it. What chance you can pull together a car for him? And we thought, well, we knew the World Championship was going to be tough for us, so doing something on home ground and just learning the car a little bit better and building morale within the team as well was good. And since then I've always thought having a British driver and a British team does lift the game a bit and builds the sort of whole camaraderie. And so it was a bit of good fortune for all of us, put it that way.
Yeah, but he was certainly far from a finished article when you got hold of him. How difficult was he as a young driver to work with?
I wouldn't say it was difficult. The process of Colin's approach to everything was, go flat out until you crash.
Yeah. Or you break it.
Or that caused its problems, and it was difficult to manage from that respect. I mean, David probably carried most of that burden, trying to get Colin to just slow down a little bit. But Colin's ability, even his engineering, his feedback in terms of setup and what the car needed to do, it was very easy to work with from an engineer's point of view. It was only when you got to an event, we always said, if ever Colin does 400 kilometres without a crash, and that 400 kilometres fits between the start and the finish of one rally, he's going to win.
Yes.
Yeah. But that process
took a little while.
It took a while.
But it was, he was very young. It's easy to forget how young he was in those days. And we put him in. We started off. He would be driving a service van with Marco Alen, helping service. We sent him on the recce's. He would, he flew with me to Finland in a helicopter one day at one event, and he mucked in with everybody, and that built the team around him as well. So that was one of the great things he had. He had a team that really was 100% behind him.
All drivers are part of the team, but he was very much one of the boys as well, wasn't he? You know, because like you say, he kind of grown up there. But what about as things progressed? Carlos came to the team, Carlos Sainz. Inevitably, we're going down the road of Lloret de Mar in '95. How difficult was the relationship up to then and at that point in Spain?
It gets lost in the mist of time. You think you look back at it, and yes, there was that trigger point in Lloret de Mar where it was we had to have quite robust discussions about it all, and I've often thought back what would have happened had we handled it differently, or how would. But it was quite important that we showed that we were in charge as management in the team. We couldn't let the drivers run the team. Carlos realised afterwards as well. I think that helped in the respect Carlos has for us as running the operation. But Carlos and Colin actually had a good relationship. I wouldn't say there was any real friction there. There was a mutual respect. Carlos was the one who'd done it before, who knew, worked his nuts off, very, very professional, great guy. And Colin was the young upstart, and so they both had an equal respect for each other, and it was a wonderful combination in reality. Yeah,
no, I'm sure. I'm trying to think, you weren't one of the three in the road. There was John Keenard.
No, I was with David, I think.
We were in the helicopter. It was Nigel Riddle, John Spiller and somebody else.
And John Kennard, wasn't it?
John Kennard,
yeah.
That's right.
You've said this, given them this instruction, you must slow them down.
Yep.
Presumably then you get on the radio and say, it didn't exactly play out. What are your memories of that? Were you astonished that, you look at the onboard?
No, we weren't astonished. We knew what was going on all afternoon. Yep. It was building to this crescendo, and we were working out what to do with it, how we were going to tackle it and what we were going to do. And I suppose the easy way out would have been saying, well, that's how it is. But that would have undermined our management, and that we couldn't let that happen. We had to retain control of the team, and we had to make sure the drivers always knew that once you let that get through, from then on you're not in control. So it was an interesting discussion in Lloret de Mar, and and I sympathised with Colin. He was egged on by Carlos. Carlos egged him on all afternoon. It was sort of I knew you wouldn't follow the team orders, and that's how you want to behave. That's how you want to behave. We get to the RAC and it all works out in the end. So
it did. But the best, the fact that 30 years on, we're still talking about that. It was, it was an incredible story. They went to the RAC dead
equal
level.
Points, yeah.
It was. How was it for you, that RAC?
Honestly, the focus was always on the next objective, winning that rally.
Yeah.
We'd won the manufacturers' championship already, hadn't we?
I think we were already there,
Yes.
or it was a formality. I don't remember
Toyota
exactly
had
the
a
points.
small issue with the turbo and that.
Yep. And I think we were in a healthy position for the manufacturers' championship, and we knew one of them was going to win the championship.
Yeah.
So I don't remember any particular
Hamsterley. Do you remember Hamsterley? On the
I don't think Colin could believe, Carlos could believe the time,
time.
could he?
He wanted you to go through the onboards, didn't he?
Did. Yep.
But that was Colin, though, wasn't it? He could pull those times out.
Yep.
And just remarkable. And then Hafren again. And
and I think at the time we knew it would either be Colin would get it to the end and win, or he would crash and Carlos would win.
It was his to lose. It was Colin's to lose.
It was Colin's to lose.
Yes.
Carlos wasn't going to beat Colin in those conditions in the UK.
Yeah.
Unless Colin made a mistake. But the way that Colin went about it, he could have easily ended up in a ditch, or he did take off
Lake District. We had a problem.
In the Lake District, we had a problem where
in Plundershaw, it took the corner off.
That could have gone the other way very easily.
As time rolled on, though, there was another British driver on the podium for you that year, Richard Burns. Chalk and cheese. How was it after working with Colin? How was it to work with a driver like Richard?
Richard really came from behind. He was always the second driver, and then we took Juha Kankinen on board, and it was always assumed Juha would lead the way. But we got to a point. I remember sitting down with Richard in Corsica, in fact, and for some reason, I don't know whether Juha just I just lost his edge or what had happened, but he never really came on the pace with us that year at all. And so I sat down with Robert and said, Robert, it's your opportunity now. You're going to have to take the lead of this team and sort of try and and you're going to be the number one driver if you could take up that responsibility. And to his credit, he did. Although it was a challenging year, and when he won the championship, was sort of no one would have believed it, and by halfway through the season that was going to happen. That was a very satisfying year, seeing Richard win.
Yeah, and just to kind of back to back Colin and Richard, they were different in the way that they approached car setup and everything.
And the way they approached their careers. Richard came at it in a very measured way. He worked a lot with Phil Fearon, didn't he?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And he had they set out, when he came to the WRC with us, they set out targets, rally
Phil
by
was a
rally,
sports
year by year.
psychologist.
Yeah.
They had a development plan.
Yeah.
And Richard pretty much stuck to it. The
Step
original
by step.
target was, we want to be setting some fastest stage times. Then we want to be fastest over a whole day, and then we want to win a rally. And when we win a rally, we'll move on to competing for a championship. Very measured, step by step.
Yeah.
And if you look back at his career, he pretty much followed the glide path. He pretty much did it step by step by step. Whereas Colin was, like I said, I'm going to be fastest.
Yeah.
And it's just a matter of waiting until I finish.
It was over the limit and then come back. I mean, Finland 92 was the obvious one, wasn't it?
Yeah, there were lots of examples of it, I can tell you.
Yeah.
But the sad thing now is I've got a picture on my study wall, and I look around my study, I've got lots of them there, but I look back and I have pictures of Henry Toivonen, and then Colin McRae, and then Richard Burns and Possum Bourne, and none of them are here today to share in that sort of history and to talk about things in the way we are today. It's a very sad reflection. Many of them, not in car accidents either, just fate.
We went through that period. Beef, Michael Park, David Williams.
Yes.
It just seemed it was just blighted that few years, but it was terrible. But Petter Solberg was the next one. At that time, when we were, say, from 95 to 03, 04, it seemed Subaru was walking on water. You could do anything. What did it feel like that you had come and conquered the likes of Toyota, the likes of Mitsubishi, Lancia, Ford? You'd taken this small manufacturer and put them and kept them on top of the world.
It was, you look back now.
Yeah.
It seems quite extraordinary, doesn't it?
Yep.
Although it's just that exuberance of youth where we never even questioned whether it was going to be possible or not. We've just and I think this is probably a trait that sort of runs through this company like a stick of rock, that we take on challenges and nobody even bats an eyelid. We say, right, we're going to go and do this now. What do you think? And everyone said, yeah, okay, let's go and do it. Take up to today, if you like. Off we go to Dakar Rally and take on all the big factory teams and try and do it ourselves. And hopefully this year will be our year. But that's a story for next year.
After 04, 05, it wasn't quite so plain sailing. What do you think? What changed? Obviously, you'd moved, David, but what changed? How did it kind of go wrong?
I think from a technical point of view, the base of the car was becoming a handicap.
Right.
A boxer engine out in front of the front wheels, a car that is bigger than it needed to be. The configuration of the engine meant it was difficult to get quite the same number of kilowatts as everybody else from that recipe. We were probably starting half a step back.
Yeah.
And it just became a struggle. And there's this guy, Sebastian Loeb, it didn't help. Yeah,
He certainly didn't.
I think on a level playing field.
I tried to get him to come and join us, if you remember.
Yeah.
I did my damnedest over in France trying to persuade him. I couldn't get him out of Citroën, though. He was took us a long time. It took us another 20 years before we got him to join us.
Well, exactly. He's here now. But Lappy and I were talking briefly about the current promoter, where we're at with WRC now. From my side, we need a Bernie. We've always needed a Bernie. You were as close as we got in the early 2000s. And are there any regrets for you personally that you were sort of dividing your what would you do differently?
What would I do differently? Well, you see, there were a couple of fundamental things that really made me give up on it. I had the opportunity, we had the finance behind us to do it. We were not short of cash. But the two things that really said to me, I'm just not going to win this battle. The first one was that Max Mosley was pretty tough about the FIA's role in choosing the events.
Right.
And I believed that we needed to be able to choose the events as the promoter. We need to be able to negotiate with the events about, the terms on which we went there. And it was the boot was on the other foot then. The FIA contract and the FIA was supportive of the individual events to the point where you couldn't exercise any leverage over them. You couldn't sort of say, we're going to start at this time every day and we're going to do this and this is the promotion we want to. So that was the first thing. The other thing was, in those days we got contributions from the car manufacturers to support the TV coverage. They all contributed towards which we had quite a big fund for television coverage those days. And I went to all the car manufacturers, I sat them down in the room. I said, look guys, I want to change. I think we should not do TV anymore. We should go for internet. And I believe we should become the internet sport, the motorsport on the internet, and use news coverage for terrestrial TV, but everything else we cover on the internet. And it was at the early days of the internet. It would be 2004, perhaps thereabouts, 2005 maybe. And they didn't believe me. They said, no, all our money is conventional television. And I couldn't persuade them to change their mind. So those are the two factors that said to me, I can't win with this. I can't make it work. And I just look back now, and I was talking to somebody only recently about what would have happened had we done that. How different the sport could be today had we gone ahead with that program and that process. Because basically, it's a different philosophy. You build the audience, and then you monetize the audience, rather than getting the sort of advertising and then speaking to an audience separately. It's a complete reversal of the commercial look at it, and I think we would have had a very different position where we are today.
Within Prodrive, you've obviously moved on to Mini, and that, for me, that was a marriage again, made potentially in heaven with the Countrymen and everything. It didn't quite work out, but after so much success with rallying, was it quite difficult to have these kind of dark years where you didn't have Colin, Richard, Petter, and that day-to-day kind of activity of being in the WRC?
Well, you say the dark years, but from where we were sitting, it wasn't. We were off to Le Mans. And we were doing great things at Le Mans, and we were that was the new challenge for us. We were moving on to the next challenge.
But Le Mans is a long way from Clocainog.
It's a very long way from Clocainog, but it's an equal challenge, and it requires different skill sets perhaps, but the same competitive approach to it. And I get as much enjoyment. In fact, if you ask me one race a year I would go to, it would be Le Mans.
Yep.
Did you miss it? Rallying?
Yeah, but it's only what I said before, to the extent that you're always on to the next challenge. We still talk about whether there's an opportunity to go back to the WRC and so on. You never know. You'd never say never.
Well, I think.
But we're not looking for something to do.
We're looking for an exclusive though, so feel free.
Look around. There's so many projects going on.
Yeah,
you don't sit around thinking, I wish we could do this. Or
there's always
the next one is always just around the corner.
I think at the beginning of this year, the World Motorsport Council, it was identified the state of the World Championship, World Rally Championship, and so I don't know how it happened, but I sort of put my hand up, or Mohammed sort of said, well, you know a bit about rallying. So we put together a small working group with Robert Reed, myself, Gary Connolly, Ronan Morgan, Andrew Molyneux, and then some Xavier from the FIA as well, and we started analysing what was wrong with the championship, what we needed to do technically, promotionally, and for the events. It's not just, there's no silver bullet. It's not just change the car and suddenly everything will be all right. There are lots of other aspects to it. And it slowed a bit, and slightly disappointing that the pace that it's taken to get the change. But we just announced the new technical regulations in general terms. I believe that those are a great starting point for a new beginning for the World Rally Championship. In fact, for rallying overall. I think the technical rules will be a lot more straightforward. It'll take away the advantage of big factory teams over the days when the local boy could turn up with a Mark II Escort and rival the top factory guys, and I hope that'll happen in the future. We now have to get the promotional side of it right. We have to make sure that everyone's aligned on that, and then the format of the events. Some of the events have to change slightly too. We've got to standardise now. This sort of start at 9 o'clock in the morning, go home at 6 o'clock in the evening, and I think we've got to get back to a little bit more of the adventure and bring some differentiation to the events amongst the championship.
It hasn't evolved, has it? It's quite, there's a degree of irony that it was your concept, the club.
No. But here's where you've got to think about, and this is why you've got to look at circumstances at the time.
Yeah.
At the time, Max Mosley said to me, David, the World Rally Championship has got so dangerous, it is threatening motorsport worldwide. You've got to get a grip of the safety issue absolutely above everything else. And it don't care what happens, you've got a year to sort it out. And we'd had cars going into the crowd. We'd had an incident with Carlos Sainz in, I think it was RSC Rally, had another incident in that year. There were all sorts of things going on. And it was getting a reputation, and everyone was getting very, very nervous about it. So we needed to introduce tighter safety rules. So we ended up with that sort of circular route going back to a central service, and that was designed to get better communications.
Yep.
We ended up with that also because the media could get closer to the cars. But if you think how things have evolved now, we've got better communications anyway.
Yeah.
We've got those communications. So those needs are not there today.
Nope.
And we've got more sensible safety precautions around most events. So those again have gone away. So we could relax what was originally the format to a different format now. And I think there's a willingness to do that as well from FIA's point of view, from the World Rally Commission, and the promoter as well. I think people are looking at, and I think it needs that change now.
Would you bring a manufacturer to WRC today?
I think you'd have to look quite carefully about the value for money. It's all about value for money. Everyone talks about, it's so expensive. Well, why on earth would the likes of Toyota and Hyundai spend so much money if they didn't actually think it was value? So it's all a value equation, and if you have one manufacturer who's prepared to pay vastly more than anybody else, that's how much they'll pay. And if the regulations aren't strong and good enough to control the performance so it allows other people to compete on equal terms, then that's the position you get into. So you either put a cost cap or you have very tightly controlled regulations that don't allow it. It doesn't matter if you gold plate the wheels or whatever you do, that's not going to make a difference to the performance, as long as you can't just spend money and buy yourself extra horsepower or extra performance. And the money will go somewhere. The drivers will get paid more, or you just do more testing, whatever it is.
Yeah, no, it's true. There is a championship that's emerging, it's evolving right now. The FIA European Historic Championship. We see Jari Matti bringing a Toyota up to 2000. Look what we're surrounded by here. Is there an appeal?
No, yes, we're don't worry, we're on to that one. David and I have been talking about that, and we're just actually it's probably we're halfway through the concept, and I think by the new year we'll be announcing something.
Really? For you, David, it was a golden era, wasn't it? That time of engineering and the cars.
Yeah. Oh yeah, you look back at the things we were doing in the 90s. From an engineer's point of view, it was great fun. We even did active suspension.
Yes, yeah.
But we had 3 active differentials and bias braking and all kinds of things that isn't allowed anymore. But it was great fun.
It's insane though, isn't it? The cars back then were 3-4 times more technologically advanced than they are now.
In some ways.
Yeah, in some respects. I think, we've some of the systems now are far more refined than we're pretty, but it was pioneering stuff. You were, if you think about how we did the anti-lag system on the turbos and launched that, and then the active differentials and
the paddle shift and all those things,
Yeah. But that, the active suspension was remarkable, wasn't it? That you developed that and you were the first there with that, and it was San Remo.
Yep.
What's the next step in terms of technology for Prodrive? Obviously, you've got the cars on the way out to Dakar right now, but where are you looking? Where's the future of the company?
In a general sense, obviously, you have to look at EV.
Yeah.
You have to recognise that sooner or later, whether it goes via hybrid. But we've done quite a few EV projects now, and you have to think sooner or later that's going to happen. It nearly happened in cross country. You know, the Audi nearly opened the door to an equivalence of technology future.
Yeah.
I think WRC is considering opening that same door to look at ways of having equivalence of performance between different powertrains.
Well, we recommended that the way to get into EVs into the World Rally Championship is to do a shorter route for EVs as part of the bringing them into it. But think for a minute, the electrical systems on the Dacia doing Dakar, that's a pretty sophisticated.
Yep.
You know, we've got the Dacia, if you look at it now, it runs a 48 volt starter generator system, and instead of all the pumps and pulleys that you have on the front of a conventional engine, it's all run electrically, and it's and the software in that is quite complex, isn't it?
Yeah, but it's part of that same journey.
Okay.
That Porsche behind us, you know, has got mechanical fuel injection. There's probably only about 3 wires. It's relentless. It's going in that direction.
Yeah.
When, how quickly, which route, but for sure you have to look around and look at what's going on with EVs.
When you look back, David, you shut the door on Silverstone 38 years ago. Could you believe that what you've achieved and where you sit and what you've accomplished today?
Well, it's what we collectively have accomplished. That's the first thing to say, because this place is made up of some extraordinary talents, and many of them have been here for donkey's years as well. And it's a great regret when I sort of see people sort of, I'm finally going to retire. I tried to get out of here 5 years ago, but I'm finally going to leave now after 40 years and things like that. So we've got lots of people here, and it's that way that you corral and harness that talent, and all work in the same direction and have similar goals and ambitions that really makes the difference. And I think if we claim anything, David and I probably, David's a great engineer, but I'm neither. And I'm just, I think we just build great teams.
There are some memories that we have that we'd like you just to have a watch.
Dave Richards was building up his World Championship team for Subaru, and at the end of 1991, Vatanen renewed a personal relationship which had last seen the light of day in a Ford Escort 10 years previously. The first task for the new team member was
testing.
Fairly young-looking fella in the car there.
Who was driving that?
That's Harry, I
Harry,
believe.
yeah.
Harry.
Harry, yeah.
Oh, look out, he sponged it into a ditch.
That a relationship that Colin had with Harry. He was a proper mentor, wasn't he?
He would have been, yes, that's right. Always.
Yeah.
No, definitely.
Threw all the notes together before the start of the rally.
Do you miss the pink?
He would tell me.
That was a bold move, wasn't it? Yeah. That was I don't know who came up with that idea.
Yeah, that was Karen.
With a younger.
And it wasn't just the pink; it was the beige trousers.
Yeah, beige trousers. No, we stood out.
Yeah.
We stood out. We were pretty bold. Oh no, I remember this Thousand Lakes. Oh my God.
Yeah.
certain aspects of the Vatanen.
Was that the first of about 3 times he crashed?
Yeah.
There was the one before he even started at Shakedown.
Yeah,
there was
Shakedown,
one Shakedown
yeah.
as well, yeah.
But there he is. He won Man of the Rally. And do you know what? The Finns just took him to their heart.
I think that is the start of the whole McRae
Myth.
myth.
The myth, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But
and it worked, didn't it? He became a superhero.
Oh,
Yeah.
in Finland, they just took him to their hearts. You just sort of,
And you know well, David, that they don't do that in Finland.
not very easily.
You know, they've got their own heroes,
Yeah.
and
No,
to
not
take
very
somebody
easily.
from the outside.
So what are we looking at?
Yeah, so the M40
Motorway.
is clearly running
Oh,
Yeah.
by then.
Look at, what's Colin with a suitcase briefcase?
yeah, that must be a setup.
That was a big setup, that was.
Hi, Colin.
I've never seen him look that smart in my life. That's my briefcase, I think he's carrying as well.
He stopped.
Sadly stopped. You can
He
still
stopped
see
with his
it.
feet still in the...
I've never seen this
How on
before.
earth did we get him that smart? I've never seen this footage before, ever.
Was he kind of difficult to deal with the media side?
Fit and ready are you to go?
We used to joke about this. We used to joke about Colin, and the favourite saying was, look, we're never going to get Colin to take tea with the Queen, so let's work on another strategy. So we actually sort of said, let's make him a superhero. And so we said, we don't do interviews, we just take film, we take photographs, we'll send him jumping off cliffs, we're riding a motorbike, we'll do all the crazy things and we'll just promote it. And he doesn't have to do interviews, we just promote those things. And it backfired on us because when he did something in Argentina, I can't remember what the whole story was. Service area. He drove too quickly through a service area. He hit somebody. It was a very minor incident, and anyone could have happened to anyone. But the stewards took him to task, and Max Mosby called me, and I ended up in front of the World Council. So Max saying, "Your driver's out of control, David. He's an absolute hooligan. I've seen it on all the pictures. He does all sorts of stupid things all the time." So it actually created this myth that got away from us.
But I think from Colin's side, he was very interested in the engineering side as well.
He was good. He was good.
Yeah.
And that it's a bit short.
Look at this.
Here, which makes it better in the twisty stuff. But it just really it takes a bit of getting used to. I'd like to have done maybe 2 or 3 days more with it, just to get confidence in it.
You know, again, you know, we talked a bit before about Mr. Kuze and the importance and the influence he had on everything. There's another individual, a guy called Jimmy Rambacheski, who was the marketing director for BAT at the time. We'd had Rothmans before, and they were part of the same group, and they wanted to promote 555. And he was the one who said, well, let's just have a blue car with big letters on it, 555 letters on it, no dilution and everything. It was just and a solid, consistent message throughout, which and that really it cut through. And you know, if you look at cars today, I don't know how many percentage, but it was like over 50% of Subarus were sold in that blue colour.
Yeah, with the gold wheels.
It's one of the best demonstrations of the value of a motorsport programme. Is there was no other explanation for why I think at one point it reached 70% of Imprezas in the UK were blue. There can only be one explanation. They were influenced by the motorsport
outside
program.
UK as well.
Still, in America, you know, the factory cars in America are blue. But whose idea was it to homologate it as the Impreza?
Oh, that was our idea.
I mean, that's genius, isn't it? Because your advertising goes throughout everything.
Well, it came also on the, you couldn't, there was something about the rear windows. You couldn't put advertising on the windows, but we homologated it with Subaru on the rear windows. I remember we did all sorts of things in those days. We were really creative, I think.
But it was about taking the regulations and just pushing them a little bit, wasn't it? And that's,
I think it is. You know, we've always felt that sort of. I've always said to the guys here that sort of, you know, it's never black and white regulations. There's always a bit of grey in between. As long as you can stand in front of me and argue the case, then that's good enough for me.
Yet despite the pressure, Vatanen still seems to have time to pose for photographers and wave at the crowd, which is all very well and very endearing, but if you're not very careful...
That was gnarly.
What about the chap who fell in the mud at the gate?
Yes, his wife wasn't too pleased, but he's all right.
Did you get that?
Barry Hinchcliffe.
You asked about the guy who you nudged and fell off the gate. Life alongside Harry.
It's fun.
I mean,
it's fun. It was actually, you know, those were really interesting days, those early years. You know, we grew up together. We're identical age. We've got families of kids identical age. They're all sort of pals together. Harry's coming here now and he's going to stay with me tonight, and we sort of, unfortunately we have to go to a funeral together tomorrow, but John O'Connor, who built that Escort you're looking at there. And so it's no, our lives have intertwined for many years, and
and there was never a dull moment in the car.
Never a dull moment. We didn't always agree with each other, and we all sort of, you know, we fell out occasionally, but that makes for a long-standing friendship sometimes.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And you were cutting your teeth in the sport at this time as well. It was,
absolutely.
It was a great time.
Yeah, we were rivals at.
Yeah, in Talbot.
In '81, we were competing against each other, Ford and Sunbeam Lotus.
You won the manufacturers.
Yeah, we won the manufacturers, and they
won
the drivers' championship. Yes. So it was a draw. And then we won the football match at the end of the season. So I think we came out on top.
But do you remember that was a Rothmans plane?
Yes.
So it was all about
special.
The promotion that went into it.
Yeah.
And that was probably 1980 or something.
Yeah.
But even this, you know, taking the time to put the camera on the outside. But Barry was a special guy as well.
Yeah. Barry was wonderful. And when I stopped co-driving, I worked alongside Barry for a couple of years doing commentary.
Did you?
Yeah, I did. a lot of the commentaries. If you go to the 82 and 83 World Championship, you'll find I was doing all the interviews and commentaries. Oh yeah, that's
And they show exactly how far saloon car sport has come in the last few years.
I didn't remember the BMW branding on the way.
Yeah, well, that's when we moved into circuit racing, into touring cars.
Background. They may lead the touring car championship, but they also dominate European rallying as well.
Rallying's where we came from. Rallying is part of our heritage almost, and we've got far more experience and a lot of results. This year we're currently sort of still leading in the...
We wore suits and ties in those, David.
No. Jump, yeah.
You've got a tie in there as well, Lappy.
I did have a tie, yeah, but not the suit.
No.
It still revolves around rallying all over the world. So we're certainly not going to forget it tomorrow. I think rallying's been changing recently, going through a bit of a sort of down cycle, if you like, and I think it's quite good that we got involved in racing to try and balance the two out. But we'll certainly continue in our rallying involvement for the future, that's most sure.
BMW to become at least distantly involved in rallying.
It was a golden era, wasn't it?
Yeah. Touring cars.
Yeah.
They were funny at times. Sometimes it's easy to forget sometimes just what we got involved in, all the different things.
Just, I mean, the Begwan winning in Corsica in 87. Massive breakthrough.
First time out.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, that was such an achievement, wasn't it, to take a racing car and make it work on the stage.
There you go. Another.
You just, I mean, you just totally take it in your stride. It's, you know, I find it quite remarkable.
Thanks for watching, and hope you enjoyed this look back at the first 40 years of Prodrive, and of course DR and Lappy's reaction to moments from earlier in their careers. If you want to see more Rally Reacts videos, check out the playlist on our YouTube channel, and stay tuned to all DirtFish content across all of our social platforms and of course on dirtfish.com.